news. Let's get to the biggest news in Nigeria's oil industry this year. One of the biggest, by the way. Of course, regarded Dangote refinery story as one of the biggest story. But of course, if you go upstream, this is the biggest, the $5 billion that Shell Nigeria is putting behind the Bonga deepwater offshore project. Let's get my guests to discuss what this means for, not just for Shell, but Nigeria itself, as well as the entire industry. Welcome, public policy analyst and energy sector analyst, Kelvin Emmanuel. Good evening.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Great to have you here in the studio tonight. Just hit the ground running, Emmanuel speaking. How big is the $5 billion? And $5 billion is a lot of money, by the way. But how big is this for investment within the Nigeria's deep water sector?
I'll say it's a start. It's not extraordinary, but it's a start. And the reason why I said it's a start, because if you look at OML 118, which was renewed before Petroleum Industry Act was passed in August of 2021, OML 118 comprises of Bonga Main, that started producing in 2005, Bonga Northwest, started producing in 2014. Bonga Main and Bonga Northwest, their capacity is 225,000 barrels per day. But currently they are functioning at anywhere around 130, 135,000 barrels per day. Now you have Bonga North, which is where Shell is going to through a tieback. Now, this is also because last year, SNEPCO had commissioned TGS, the Norwegian company, Ramform, to do seismic survey for the offshore assets in Nigeria. They paid about $28 million in consultancy fee, and they have multi-tier agreements with partners and regulators. Yeah, so it has the seismic data of the entire offshore of Nigeria. And the one attraction from a technical perspective is the fact that they're not building a new floating production, storage, and offloading surface substructure. They're doing what they call a tieback, where the 8 wells they have that will be producing, that will start producing anytime first oil will be achieved, anytime around 2029, 2030, will basically have wellheads connected through pipes to what they call a riser, which is an aggregation point that will now load into the FPSO. So they don't need to invest capex in building FPSOs around marginal blocks that will aggregate oil to what they have collecting for Bonga Northwest and Bonga Main. So they're producing
sharing an existing facility.
Exactly.
Speaking.
And what that technology has been able to achieve, that is used mostly in the Gulf of Mexico, offshore in America, is that anything within a 100-kilometer radius, you can use a riser to aggregate pipes to well. So you have 8 wells producing, and you have 8 wells for water that will inject water, because when you drill oil to subsurface, you have water, you have oil, you have gas. So the 8 wells for water will reinject the water that comes out of the wellheads back into the wells provided for water. So basically you have Shell at 55%, you have Exo at 20%, you have Nigerian Agip Oil Company, Eni, at 12.5%, and you have Total upstream and offshore at 12.5%. It's a production sharing contract. It's not a joint venture contract. And what that means is that, yes, NNPC at the end of the day gets signature bonus and it gets production threshold
from this deal.
Bonus from this deal. But the Nigerian government doesn't have equity in the deal. So you have what they call your profit oil, your tax oil, and your cost oil. On your, not profit oil, your royalty oil, your tax oil, and your cost oil. There's no profit oil for production sharing contract. You have profit oil for joint venture, unregistered joint venture. The difference here is this. And this is the reason why the work that the Presidential Committee on Tax Reforms is very, led by Tayo Oyedele, is very remarkable. Because the IOCs have seen a consistency in policy direction. The difference is that under the existing structure for royalty calculations, the parameters that goes into computation, royalties are calculated mostly based on depth of what you're producing. Under the revised structure, you have depth, you have volume, and you have price. The committee has basically come up with a model that calculates royalties on depth. Anything above 200 meters, they pay 10%. Yeah, anything below 100
Deeper than-
meters, they pay 20%. Then for volume, anything above 15,000 barrels per day, they pay 18.5%.
So sort of recalibrating.
They are recalibrating the system.
Yes.
For price, anything between $60 and $100. Currently, WTI is anywhere around $70.
Yes.
You pay 4%. So if you look at the cumulative average, which is 32.5 divided by 30, that's 10.8% on royalty payments. On tax oil, for PSC, you have 50% flat tax rates that the IOCs are going to pay. For cost oil, for achieving of your costs. So you have $5 billion, the amortization on the shelf life of the asset is 10 years because the shelf life of the asset is 10 years, from 2030 to 2040, right? For that shelf life, you have $500 million per year.
Yes.
So it means that they are going to be recovering $500 million worth of oil per year. Yes. So when you take out your royalty, your tax, and your cost oil, then you have what is left for the production sharing partners to share.
So that's the point. I was just trying to get to the bottom line as to what comes to Nigeria when the headline is $5 billion US. That does not really mean that there's $5 billion on the table in Nigeria's pocket, is it?
It doesn't mean there's $5 billion on the table because, number one, it's not joint venture. And even if it were joint venture, NPPC usually doesn't have the capex to contribute to a joint venture agreement. And this is the reason why I've always said that you need to come to a point where the minister can prevail on the FEC to move from PSCs and unregistered joint ventures to incorporated joint venture company model. So NPPC has equity and NUPRC does not only get royalty payments, but you also have profit oil and you have equity in that agreement structure.
It makes sense because, again, all said and done, in terms of production outlook for Nigeria, will it raise the numbers for us? Remember, we're now so ambitious about additional 1 million barrels per day that the NUPRC says it wants Nigeria to have perhaps over a 1 year, whatever, 2 year period. Will it take us further there, even though before we start hitting something from this Bonga North was going to be by the year 2030?
Well, first of all,
5 years down the line,
we have to ask ourselves the question, why is it that Bonga Main and Bonga Northwest, that has capacity to do 235, is doing 130, 135,000 barrels per day? First question we have to ask ourselves. Number two, you have Bonga North that FID has been commissioned for. Then you have Bonga Southwest that is yet to be commissioned for FID. Yeah. First oil will be achieved in 2030. So they say that those 8 wells has estimated ultimate recovery, EUR, at 300 million barrels over a 10-year period. When I did the numbers, I divided 300 million by 30,650 days. I got about 82,000 barrels per day on a cumulative basis. So considering that it will take them 3 to 4 years to hit peak production at 110,000 barrels.
Yes, for this Bonga.
For this,
yes.
I don't think it's going to move the needle as much. But let me tell you another reason why this is important for the production partners. Other than ESSO, which is the offshore arm of Mobil, Shell, NAOC, Eni, and Total are the joint venture partners of NLNG. 1 barrel of crude oil gives you 6,000 cubic feet of natural gas. Today, as we speak, NLNG needs 3.5 billion standard cubic feet of natural gas to hit peak capacity for train 1 to 6. They have 65% currently. So at peak production, they will be getting associated gas of 660 million standard cubic feet of gas on a daily basis to feed into NLNG. And this is also because in 2026, train 7 is going to come on stream.
Yes.
And they are going to now need 4.5 billion SCOF daily and have 2 billion SCOF deficits, which means their capacity utilization will drop from 65% to 44%.
So we need more. So we need more type of this Shell, Bonga field investment, and very quickly, Chevron, Total Energies, and a few others are on the queue to make similar investments.
Look. There is a quid pro quo here with the Renaissance and Shell deal. I'm expecting that either before the end of this year or January 2025, we might see a revision of that deal that was rejected because of pre-commissioning, pre- and post-investment divestment liability costs of about $12 billion. I'm expecting that the government is going to have a second look and might approve that deal between Shell and Renaissance. So there's a quid pro quo that we have to look at, you know. So at the end of the day, you see that in January, in the Q1 of 2025, ExxonMobil might go ahead and approve your WOWO field, you know, and invest, commission FID of anywhere between $8 and $10 billion that has CNOOC Total as production sharing partners in it, you know. But you need more of such investments.
Yes, I'm just wondering what make investments such as these, and I'm coming to investment decision and putting money on the table and putting boots on the ground, as it were, takes such a long time to occur. This is coming almost 10 years. When is the next one? Another 10 years?
See,
or would this facilitate? Would this be the cutting razor?
The IOCs are moving away from onshore. They're moving away from host community issues. They are moving away from the fact that when they bring oil to subsurface, they have to worry about moving oil from wellheads to flow stations because of the encumbrances associated with it. No wellhead metering, lack of SCADA, lack of fiscalization. You have your recovery ratio low because you have to worry how you're going to move, and you also have alternative crude oil evacuation routes that have been set up by regulator and UPRC. They are moving to deep offshore where all they have to worry for is their FPSO. You know, you bring oil to subsurface and your FPSO stores, and then you load and you go. You don't have to worry about the issues onshore.
We have more FPSOs coming into Nigeria now.
Exactly, because the IOCs are realizing that the way to eliminate that risk of their recovery ratio between wellheads and flow station, which is where it's metered to terminal, I think metering should start from wellheads, is by going completely away from land, go to sea, and, you know, worry about the cost and all the issues associated with what you have there. You know, so I think the government needs to answer the question on developing a commercial framework for gas, not just for crude oil production and associated gas, but also for non-associated gas fields.
Aren't they working in tandem? You have the decade of gas, you have the NPPC, and you the PRC. Aren't they Siamese twins, in the manner of speaking? Or you have policies and practices that are a little bit at variance here that perhaps make investment become a little bit, hold on a second, we're not too sure where you guys meet together, and then we have a single flow through.
NPPC has not answered the question of who the ultimate owner or who the sharing partners is for gas on PSC fields deep offshore. They have not answered the question. They've not really developed a commercial framework. That's a question they need to answer. And it's important not just for associated gas. It's important that comes to crude oil. It's also important for non-associated gas fields. You know, if they answer that question, they are going to see more investments coming. And I also think that it's important for us to, when we're looking at cost oil, look at the fact that pre you meeting up your recovery for what you invested. For example, they're investing $5 billion. The shelf life of the asset is 10 years. So if you prorate it, that's $500 million per year of cost oil they have to recover. There is a 65% allowance on deductions for your capex. After you meet up with your costs, there is an 85% allowance for deduction on your capex. NNPC needs to develop a commercial framework. And beyond that, the government needs to realize that this is the best time for you to move NNPC to the market so that you can move from PSC structure where the government doesn't have any equity and is collecting signature bonus and production threshold bonus and is entitled to royalty oil and tax oil with a flat rate of 50%, to incorporated joint venture company models where NNPC can bring up his own equity and he doesn't have to apply carry tax relief for cost oil, and he doesn't have to deal with JV cash calls, which it has struggled to pay for years, and it has equity in the profit oil.
Yeah, so we need to fix that. We just thought that the Petroleum Industry Bill Act actually fixed everything for us, and that all things are secured within that particular framework. But it doesn't look like it.
There's so many sections of the Petroleum Industry Bill that has not been implemented. And the popular section I like to quote is section 317, 7 to 9 on the specification for petrol imported to Nigeria and the fact that if you have refining capacity that is active in Nigeria, the regulator is not supposed to give import licenses for people to bring in products. You can see what's happening to Dangote, which is unfortunate. Yeah,
it's unfortunate. But again, we've got $5 billion right now in terms of, will this catalyze further investment? How soon do you think that will happen?
I think
Just to summarize.
in 2025, you're going to see ExxonMobil commission investment as a quid pro quo for the ExxonMobil Seplat deal that was given ministerial consent. I also think that the government is going to have a reconsideration and green light the Seplat, the Shell and Renaissance deal.
Yes.
I think Chapal Energies might also commission FID, considering the Chapal Energies and Total onshore fields going through, their deal going through, But I think you need more of such investment. I think you need anywhere between 20 and 25 billion US dollars to reach a point where you can catalyze.
Kind of a threshold. Yeah.
Yes, you can catalyze output on a daily basis. But I'll tell you what. Beyond catalyzing output on a daily basis for deep offshore, the government has to pay attention to onshore and swamp. It has to pay attention to the fact that there's crude oil today being lost between wellheads and flow stations. And if you don't develop SCADA and fiscalize, if you don't get what you produce from wellheads, there is a loss of crude oil there.
Yeah, and there's a whole lot of home advantage when you do onshore than offshore.
There is home advantage, but it doesn't favor the IOCs because
they've historically have the locals taking those things up. So we need to develop that.
We definitely need to develop that, but there are quite a number of encumbrances. For example, the Petroleum Host Communities funds of 30% currently, as we speak, is not being implemented. It's in the PIO, but it's not being implemented.
Okay. Okay, we've got quite a whole lot to deal with, but let's see how it goes. Because if you stretch these from onshore back to from offshore back to onshore, you will have to deal with some of these nuances that you talked about. But for Shell to say, look, we're ready to go, we're good to go, that means there's some value that Nigeria's industry has to put on the table, and others can quickly just say, okay, fine, let's go. It looks like some reforms are taking place. It looks like we're moving the needle somewhat.
Nigeria has sweet crude. Nigeria has 34 blends of crude oil. Bonga is one of the blends. It has sulfur level. It has the lowest sulfur level for crude oil in the world. That's why it's called sweet crude, 0.15% compared to about 0.5 to 0.7% in other parts of the world. It has light crude that has API degree of over 30 degrees. It's easy to refine. You get more transportation fuels. So it's a crude that is favored. The IOCs are never going to leave Nigeria. They're just going to move away from land, deep offshore, where they are not going to have a lot of interaction with community issues and legacy issues they've had historically over the last 5 decades. So I think it's going to be a play where you see more IPPG members, Independent Petroleum Producers Group, their members, take on onshore and swamp assets, while the IOCs move deep offshore like you're seeing currently.
Do you think we've done so far very well this year, as far as the industry is concerned?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Now, if you take out the
NPPC just started remitting money to the Federation account last month. Since January, government is bailing out NNPC when NNPC should be bailing out the government.
Well, the government owns the NNPC, by the way.
NNPC lifted that, but that's questionable because if you do an audit, you ask yourself, are they really owing? NNPC lifted 196 million barrels of crude oil last year, but it can't remit money to the federal government of Nigeria. And the Nigerian Governors Forum is not saying anything about it. You have issues in the midstream. NNPC cannot guarantee crude oil. They did a Naira-based swap that has fallen apart. Dangote started importing crude oil from America again. He's talking to the Angolans about setting up upstream activity to drill crude oil and ship to Lagos.
Yes.
It's unfortunate. How do you explain that you're one of OPEC members, a major producer, and your biggest refiner is having to go and import crude oil and talking about producing crude oil overseas to be able to feed his refinery? It doesn't make any sense. NNPC has issues with the refinery in Port Harcourt. That's not a refinery because what they have in Port Harcourt cannot directly refine crude oil. They are getting blend stuff from somewhere else, and they are blending it with naphtha condenses to produce a grade of PMS
where does that come from? Where are they getting that from? Because that facility is not fully, say 75% operational.
Number one, whenever you have a refinery producing, you have refinery gases. NNPC has not shown us propane that is produced, lighter gases produced from that refinery that is being sold to the public, number one. Number two, the major trunk line that is supposed to take crude oil from Bonny River Terminal to Eleme is not functioning. It was vandalized. So how are you sourcing your crude oil feedstock?
So, yeah, to get the whole.
Number three, when Shell built that refinery in 1965, they built it to produce LPFO, HHK,
yes,
low profile oil, the AGO.
But we just,
they didn't build it to refine PMS. So the question is, if you don't have a crude distillation unit and a catalytic reforming unit that can convert heavy naphtha into lighter distillates like premium motor spirit and propane gases, how are you claiming you have a refinery? You don't have a refinery. All these are issues, upstream and midstream, that is making me to conclude that the oil and gas sector has underperformed. It contributed about 5.7% to GDP in 2024.
I'm looking for some.
And the FX market is in crisis.
Yeah, the FX market is in crisis. Yes, but then if you look at the sector broadly speaking, folks will say, well, looks like we pay more for petrol at the gas stations. So the whole issue of the refineries, which belongs to the federal government, hasn't fully been 100% or at least fully resolved. So we've got a whole lot of issues that we're going on board onto 2025. So do you think we have more work to do in 2025 than we've had previously? Or we've been able to, well, we're still in transition, sort of?
You're going to see incremental progresses that won't move the needle on a major way if the president continues this current status quo that you have. I think the president needs to fire the entire management of NNPC. That's my view. I think he also needs to change the management of NMDPRA. I think he needs to approve for FEC to send NNPC to the market and unbundle the corporation and require an audit and a complete business process reengineering. NNPC needs to go to IPO. The government needs to take the back seat and allow the markets to decide its external, non-executive board, its executive management, and its core team. And then restructure the entire business lines. There are so many business lines at NNPC that shouldn't be. I'll give you another example. NNPC has a subsidiary that is in charge of pipes and depots for distribution, transmission and distribution. I don't think NNPC should keep it. I think it should operate a model where it concessions is aggregation, transmission and distribution pipes, to companies that are competent, that have shown the capacity to manage it, and then cut them in the pipeline fee, which is about $3 a barrel for upstream for aggregation.
Just make the whole process market oriented.
The Bureau of Public Enterprises, BPE, proposed that in 2012. They didn't take the recommendation.
But it's still there.
It's still there, but it's not been implemented. That's why I say you need a proper business process reengineering. Okay. And that cannot come from this management at us.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's okay. Fairly said. I'm sure we have more of a work in progress as far as the oil sector is concerned than a lot of any other areas. But there's a whole lot of work in progress. I'm sure Mr. President has a lot because we've got to make haste while the sun shines. 2025 is just how many years away from the next election? He says
he's going to borrow 13 trillion naira to finance his 47.9 trillion naira budget.
No, the budget is going to be tomorrow. So let's wait and listen to Mr. President tomorrow and hear what the National Assembly will say.
Okay.
And then maybe we'll just take the budget from a completely different attack, as it were. But for tonight, let's leave the $5 billion on the table. Leave it there. Thank you.
Thanks. That's a good one.